Hello there, everybody. Sean Sheehan back here with another episode of The Sheehan Show as we look forward to the big card over in Moscow, Russia this week as Bellator 269 goes down with the legend Fedor Emelianenko in the main event. And I suppose it was a good weekend for Bellator all around. We had a pretty interesting main event with Vadim Nemkov versus Julius Anglikis. Obviously Anglikis knocked him down and almost knocked him out in the first round before Nemkov came back with a great display to take that one in. Corey Anderson had a very, very easy win in I'm looking here, 51 seconds against Ryan Bader. Just came out and countered Bader and knocked him out very, very easily. So that sets up a fantastic finale there in the Bellator light heavyweight tournament. Brent Primus is putting himself right in line for a Bellator 155-pound shot. The fight we'll be talking about next week, or maybe the week after. It's getting close anyway. Here in Ireland, with Waterford's own Peter Coyley taking on Patrik Pitbull for the now vacant 155-pound title. Then with Henry Corrales up at 145, taking on Vladislav Pavlyuchenko and winning that one over decision. If you watched my betting show this week, that was one of the bets given, and I got 4 from 5 this week, so it's not bad. That'll be out again tomorrow for this weekend, so I look forward to that. Karl Albrechtsen as well got a good win there. So all in all, a very successful card for Bellator. Even on the undercard, Nick Brown, their guy coming through, the former LFA champion, Lance Gibson Jr., Jalen Bates, all their kind of up-and-comers, and as well Maria Henderson, obviously the wife of Vincent Henderson, got a win there. So a good win, or a winning weekend, I would say, for Bellator, with the UFC maybe not being the best card in the world. So Bellator go on to next week with their next card, and that is Bellator 269, which goes down over in Moscow in Russia, as I mentioned. And same as I said last week, it's packed with lots of Russian fighters on the undercard, and a big name obviously up at the top, and a very, very big name, but we will get to that very soon. So before I even get into this, apologies immediately for the pronunciations, which will be absolutely butchered here. But however, we will get through it anyway. We will try our best. So the first fight I'm looking at here, and as well, these records. There's different records here in Sherdog. There's different records in Wikipedia, on Bellator, on everywhere. So if my records are different to those of Sherdog, look at the ones that are on screen, hopefully here. Those are the correct records. So the first fight on the ledger for Bellator 269 is a featherweight clash. I'm going to quickly run through the prelims, and I'll take a little bit more in depth of one specific prelim and in the main card as well. Actually, we'll start out with the fight that has fallen out, which is a very, very big fight to follow. Andrei Karashkov versus Rustam Khabilov. I was looking at that fight, kind of breaking that down a couple of days ago before it fell out, and that's a shame. It would have been an absolutely fantastic fight, but however, we will progress without it. Opening up the card will be Gadzi Radomanov, who's 22 fights, won 11 of them inside the distance, won 8 of his last 9. He was in the PFL. I suppose a lot of people remember him from there. Beat Steven Seiler. Has missed weight a few times as well, though. He will fight Alexander Blinken 8-2, who's won six of his wins by stoppage, won 5 of his last 6. So that's a pretty good matchup there in the featherweight division. Then England's Aidan Lee in the featherweight division, also 9-5. He's 5 wins by submission. He's a rear naked choke over Ludovic Klein, who we saw at the weekend. Didn't come out with the best performance there, but still, that's a pretty good win. He's fighting Alexander Ostrov, who has 11 fights. He's from the gym of the School of Arts of Alexander Shlemenko, so what kind of fighter he will be. 6 decision, 2 KOs, his Bellator debut, and he's won his last 3 in a row. So you'll probably guess who the crowd will be favouring in that one as well, with the Russian taking on the Englishman there. Cyril Slidnikov in 12-2. He's a win over, this is the heavyweight division. Everyone knows Beast Boy Chris Bennett, who's in the UFC at the moment. 1-1 in Bellator, fights out of Fedor's gym, and his nickname is Baby Fedor. So, you have to be a special type of fighter, I suppose, to get that sort of nickname. So he will be looking to put it on the on the line here. And he's fighting Rab Truzel, who's out of Scotland, I believe, 10-7-1. It's his Bellator debut. Lost by rear naked choke a couple of months ago. And to be honest, this is a bit of a gimme matchup. There's a couple of these here for some of these fighters, but this is definitely one of them as well in the heavyweight division. But look, in the heavyweight division, we never know what's going to happen. After that, then there's a welterweight bout. Gracias Bosnian, 11-4 out of Armenia, 6 wins by submission. He lost to Austin Vanderford. I suppose people would know him best for that. He's fighting Alexei Shurvich, 12-4. He's won 5 in a row now, 8 wins by KO, and it's on his Bellator debut. So he looks like a pretty good fighter coming through, and that could be a fun bout there at welterweight. I'll skip back to the Brian Moore fight in a moment, because I think Brian Moore is a guy who we need to pay a little bit more attention to. A little bit biased here with the Irish side of it, but I definitely think he is, and we will get back to that in a second. Then there's a women's flyweight fight. Irene Aleksev, her nickname is the Russian Ronda Rousey, so we baby Fedor, the Russian Ronda Rousey. She's 3-1, and her last win is by armbar, so you can guess where she got that nickname. And she's fighting Serena Leo Page, who's 5-2, and her only stoppage loss is via armbar. So could that be the finish there? We will see, I suppose, on Saturday night. Then the next one, the women's flyweight fight, Darina Madziu, and you will remember her because she is the lady who beat up that really, really fat guy about maybe this time last year. It's hard to know what the road, and these months feel like fucking years. So you'll remember her by that. She's 3-1 with her last win. She's 3-1, all 3 wins against 0-0 fighters, and her loss is to a 1-0 fighter. So yeah, it's hard to know how good she is when you're fighting that sort of level, but that doesn't suggest it's the best record in the world. She's fighting Katerinza Sadura, who's 4-4. She lost to Sinead Kavanagh, who obviously is fighting for the title next out of Ireland. So that's there's no loss or no shame in that one. So that's a good test from Madziu. So we'll see what she's made of, fighting someone with 8 fights, 4 wins. That's probably the best opponent of her career. So we'll see where she's going, because she has that bit of fame from that viral video from last year. So we can see. I suppose we'll see what she can do with it, and we can see if she can put it into like a real career with a bit of longevity. And then in the lightweight division, Vladimir Tokov, who's the brother of Anatoly, who we'll talk about later on in the main card even. He lost last time out to go 6-1. He's fighting Armand Guy, who beat Chris Bungard, lost to Colin Fletcher. It's 28 fights. He's been around for a long, long time. So that's a big test for him as well. So all in all, not a standout undercard. I think the undercard from last week, there was a lot of good prospects coming through, even if they weren't in the toughest matchups, and maybe they weren't the best fights in the world in terms of fighter A versus fighter B, but maybe it was a fighter A versus fighter Z in some cases. But we don't really have much of it here. I don't think it's the best undercard in the world. Obviously, losing the big fight I mentioned earlier was a bit of an issue, because a couple were moved. Obviously, one was moved up as well. But look, I think Vladimir Tokov might be a good guy coming through, definitely a guy to look out for. That Bosnian versus Shurvich fight as well, I don't think that will be bad. So those to look out for. But definitely, to me, the standout here, and even all bias aside, I think Brian Moore, he is the standout player on the undercard. He was ranked when the Bellator rankings started, the bantamweight rankings. He's won at least one, if not 2 fights since then, and he's fallen out of the rankings somehow. And he's fighting Nikita Mikhailov. He hasn't fought in about 2 years. Nikita, very good wild spinning striker, strong top game, but not an insane takedown game, or not an insane top game. Cut up badly in his last fight. Very kind of open jiu-jitsu guard. Reminds me a little bit of maybe a more kickboxing heavy Bryn Primus. He likes a bit of jiu-jitsu. He will go there with his open guard and try to submit you when it goes to the ground, but throws spinning wild stuff. And Brian Moore, if anyone has seen him fight over the last while, he has just become like one of the most technical fighters we've seen in this part of the country, or this part of the world even, in a long time. His last couple of wins, Jordan Winsky, who's a strong American wrestler, he just took him apart really for 3 rounds. Simone Aldana knocked him out with a right hook in the second round, very good, and did a demolition job over San Lebin. back in 2019 as well. So unfortunately for Brian, he's only been able to really get one fight a year over the last while. You know, he's supposed to fight Eric Perez. That fell through. I think there was a coronavirus issue as well. Jared Scoggins fight fell through. And, you know, the name fights have really fallen through for Brian Moore, and that's probably why he has kind of fallen out of the rankings, or maybe, you know, the rankings adjusted after the first ones. But he deserves to be in there. There isn't a shadow of a doubt in my mind that Brian Moore deserves to be in that top 15 rankings. Like, if you even go back, I know it's 4 years ago now, but his fight against AJ McKee was, I think AJ McKee has said it's the toughest fight of his career. Brian Moore is that good. He puts it on, you know. He lost to Noah Lahat and AJ McKee in Bellator, but other than that, for the and you know, Daniel Weichel as well, who's obviously a very good fighter, but other than that, those are only good names he's losing to there. You know, he's won other 2 Bellator fights in the middle of that. He fought a couple of times in Bama. Tommy McCafferty, a very good guy on the scene here. He beat him, and you know, Brian Moore is one of these guys, and I've spoken about this to the guys who've even been covering MMA longer than me here in Ireland. You know, he fought all the way back in 2011 against Andy Young, who's a very, very good guy and on the scene around here as well. He fought Mike Wilkinson, you know, who's fought all over the world in many big fights as well. Very young in his career, and he was one of the guys that was there with the likes of Conor McGregor, Cathal Pendred, Paddy Hewlin in the old SPG gym in the early days. He's really paid his dues, and maybe he's one of those guys that, you know, he isn't as maybe outward on Instagram, and he doesn't talk as much, and he doesn't, you know, get as much recognition as the other people, or isn't known as much as other people, but he's put in as much, if not more, work than all of those people. And to me, he's in his prime right now, and this is the time where Brian Moore needs to go to the next level. I know it's no easy feat. Mikhailov is in his home turf here. He'll be looking to get the win. You know, Bellator aren't putting Brian Moore in with a Russian guy in Russia for Brian Moore to win that fight. Let's put it that way. And I'm sure Brian Moore will have that in the back of his head, and he'll have that chip on his shoulder coming into that fight. So this is a big, big matchup for him. Without a shadow of a doubt, the standout fight on the prelims, and the one I think, you know, all bias aside, you should be definitely looking out for in that one. So yeah, and I think it'll be a good fight as well. You know, if you haven't seen Brian Moore, his hands are just fantastic. You know, he actually broke his hands a couple of times over the last few years, but he has turned into like a really, really good boxer. He does a lot of training by himself at home. He lives in Wexford, which is, I don't know, a 2-hour drive maybe from Dublin, where he obviously trains with John Kavanagh and SBG. So he's to do a lot of training by himself at home, and I think, you know, hitting the bag and doing different things has really improved his game. You know, himself, he has said it, and I've interviewed him before, and John Kavanagh said it as well, that he's kind of a test guy, you know, a test piece for that sort of training, and it seems to be working well so far. So, you know, that mixed with the wild striking of Mikhailov, very fun fight, and I'm really, really looking forward to that. So we won't dwell on that for too long, but yeah, that should be a fun fight. Then opening up the main card, I'm actually not sure. Bellator sent out a press release, but, you know, fights get moved around, so I think this is opening up the card. It is Anatoly Tokov against Sharaf. I'm going to go with Sharaf. Davlatmurodov, okay? Davlatmurodov. Let's go with that. I suppose we all know Anatoly Tokov, well, me anyway, and I suppose a lot of MMA fans, from the Fedor fight with Maldonado a few years ago, where it had that, you know, there was a lot of madness on that card, but it had the mad commentator, and he kept going, Anatoly Tokov, and everyone kind of remembered him, and he's a damn good fighter as well, don't get me wrong. He's only lost 3 times. 2 of them were to Magomed Karimov and Ramzan Emayev, which we saw at the weekend. You know, he's a good fighter. He didn't go for him at the weekend, but we know how good Magomed Karimov is. He's beaten Shemenko, beaten Gerald Harris, 16 KOs, 7 submissions in his career. And watching his fight against Gerald Harris, I think it was that one, yeah, he almost got knocked out but then came back, and he's just tough. Anatoly Tokov is one of these guys where you don't want to get into a brawl with him, because he has such power in those hands. He has literally switch you off power in those hands. So good. Now, he can get got to 2, and he does get hit, as you know, we saw in that fight where he almost got knocked out. So look, if you're a harder hitter than him, and if you have that ability, by all means go into it. But if you don't, and if you think you're not going to win that war, Anatoly Tokov is probably not the guy to be gone in there with. So you know, the Russian crowd will be behind him too. And look, his opponent, you know, Sharaf is not a bad fight either. He's beaten the likes of Brett Cooper, we've seen obviously a lot in Bellator, Benny Alloway we've seen in the UFC. It's his Bellator debut, but he's 13 finishes. His fight versus De Jesus was absolutely mad. I was watching that. It was just a crazy back and forth. He's a well-rounded guy as well. He's a guy that if you go mad, he will take you down. He will dip under and try to take you down. And if Tokov goes too wild in this fight, that's definitely something I could see. I could see Tokov, falling foul of that. And, he's good wrestling and everything himself. But if Sharaf, if Tokov gets too wild and if he is smart, I think he will take it there, because getting into a wild fight with Tokov, as I mentioned, isn't exactly what you don't want to do. And if you have that wrestling, if you have the intelligence to take it to the wrestling realm, then by all means you should do it. So that should be fun, and I'm looking forward to. I'm really looking forward to seeing that fight. There's some. There is some good matchups on this, and that is I'm looking here. It is opening up the card. So the next one here on the card is a catchweight bout between Usman Nurmagomedov, who's obviously Khabib's cousin, and Patrik Pietila, who is. I'll start with Pietila. Sometimes you watch a fighter, right, and you watch Usman Nurmagomedov, you watch Anatoly, Tokov, even Sharaf. I was watching a bit of it, and you see like some really good parts of their game. Maybe they're not as good as their opponent, but you see how maybe they could hurt their opponent. Maybe they're very good leg kicks, and different parts of their game that might not always stack up to someone else, but might cause a little bit of trouble in some ways. Watching Pietila, I don't see much there. Now, what I do see, he hits hard. Definitely hits hard. I watched a couple of his fights, and I watched kind of a compilation of some of his best moments, and without a shadow of a doubt, he hits hard. But he is wide open for strikes, just wide open to be hit. Every time he throws a punch, it feels like he gets hit. And as I said, I mentioned with Tokov as well, that's grand if you hit a lot harder than him. And he does with most people, but he's fighting Usman Nurmagomedov here. Pietila hasn't fought in 2 years. He's very game. Look, he's very game without a shadow of a doubt. Very good in the clinch and hits hard. But to me, this is a complete mismatch. It really is. Depending on what betting odds are out by the time my betting show comes out, I think I'll definitely be looking at Usman Nurmagomedov here inside the distance if he isn't an absolutely insane price altogether. But as I mentioned, Khabib's cousin, he fights at a much more slow pace though than Khabib, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Khabib fights at such a bad pace. There's very few people in the world who you would probably advise to do that. He's also a very good striker, very technical, throws a lot of question mark kicks, lovely hooks to the body. That's one of my favorite things to see. See a lot of those guys throwing the lead hand uppercut to the face, that wide open punch, and they just get countered every time. But when you see people throwing, if they have the very good wrestling as well, or if they're not finding a jiu-jitsu expert and don't want to get in close, those people who throw that beautiful left hook to the body and get you, dig you into the liver and step away, it's a beautiful shot, and he throws that shot really, really well. He's so strong as well. He can just throw people to the floor. He does get taken down himself the odd time because he's so relaxed. The Mike Hamill fight was a bit of that as well. So, Usman Nurmagomedov isn't the best fighter in the world right now. Could he become that? It's hard, you couldn't rule him out, absolutely. But there are certain ways to get to him. Does Pietila have any of those ways to get to him? I don't think so. Look, unless he hits him with a big shot, does he have a puncher chance? Absolutely. But that to me is a very, very, very small chance. And I'm not giving my picks here per se, but my pick is Usman Nurmagomedov to win this fight by a country mile. I just think he is far, far and away better. And a very exciting prospect. A lot of people watch these cards maybe to see the next prospect coming through, to see who the next guy is. And I personally love, at the weekend, Norma Dumont fought against Aspen Ladd, and people were kind of giving out after the second round, and even on the commentary, that she wasn't up in the pace and she wasn't, taking that fight away from Ladd a little bit more. But I think the technical kind of jabbing masterpiece she put on, and literally was just a jabbing masterpiece for a lot of it, I thought that was lovely. I'm a big fan of a jab, and Nurmagomedov to me is one of those people who he does more than that. He will do more than Dumont did in that fight, but he also kind of does what he needs to, and he knows what he needs to do as well, which is a very, very important thing when you're fighting in a barely ruled fist fight. And I love his technique. I think he's a very, very good technical fighter. And as mentioned, those question mark kicks, the 1-2s down the middle, hooks to the body. I feel like it's going to be a tough night for Patrik Pietila. And yeah, look, he's happy to be there anyway, I'm sure. But that's it for that fight. And then we have two, obviously, heavyweight fights to close out the main card. We have Vitaly Minakov taking on Sowma. I talked about the last fight and I said they're very different. I couldn't find more different heavyweights than Vitaly Minakov and Sowma. Sowma's one of those guys. He waits and waits and waits. He trusts his power. Now, sometimes that gets him a knockout win, and he absolutely destroys someone. And sometimes it gets him a unanimous decision loss, like it did against Tyrell Fortune. I watched that fight and I was like, when's he going to throw a punch? It was one of those ones, especially for the first round. I was like, when's this guy going to throw a punch? He just didn't. And in the Honey Marks fight, he was more attacking in that fight and he got the KO. And now, whether that's a switch or whether that's a realization, looking back at all your fights, that you need to be more attacking, or whether that's a realization that, look, once I do pick my shots and once I can land that power, this guy is going out, whoever I'm fighting. We will see. Like, Sowma's still very, very young in his career. Let me just look here. How many fights is he? 7-2, 9 fights, fighting someone like Minakov, who is, 23 fights, but he's a lot more experienced than 23 fights would suggest, in my opinion. And I just think, if you're on the side of Sowma, you're thinking he has to be, Minakov has to be perfect not to get hit. But Sowma, it lets so much of the fight time go waiting to land his shot. It just gives his opponent so much more time and so many more opportunities to do his work, especially at heavyweight. And Minakov, honestly, watching him back, I think Minakov might be the most underrated heavyweights of a generation. He's such a good fighter. It's just brilliant. Throws hard to get into the clinch and get takedowns. Threw Tim Johnson around, who we'll talk about in a minute. He literally threw him around like a baby. He's serious power. Hurt Johnson of a stretched backhand. Yeah, watching that fight, he kind of jabbed into range and he kind of fell as he was kind of throwing the jab. Or not necessarily fell, but Johnson kind of got out of range and he threw the right hand not necessarily completely off balance, but completely kind of out of the range from where you'd want to throw the right hand, and he still knocked him out with it. Just insane. He's a jab KO on his record. Very athletic, very good ground and pound. Like Vitaly Minakov, I know he's been around for a good while and he's gotten a lot of adulation and people speak about him as a very good fighter, but I think he's right up there. Really do think he's right up there, and I would love to see him fighting at the very top level again, and fighting for the title. Is Bader still champion? I did my preview last week, and I totally forgot that Bader is still the Bellator heavyweight champion. There's someone else, a light heavy or an interim champion. I can't keep up with Bellator and all their titles and all their their tournaments and all of this. So, but Minakov definitely should be back there. Even if he's not with Bellator, I'd love to see him in the UFC fighting. There's so many great fights. I'd love to see him fight someone like a Derek Lewis or loads of other people. So I know he's fought. Was it Volkov he fought as well before? He's some very, very good wins in his career. Like looking at someone, he beat Tim Johnson last time out. Okay, lost to Czech Congo, but he's beaten the likes of Antonio Silva, DJ Linderman, who 30 fights at the time, beating Czech Congo back in the day. Yeah, he beat Volkov. So he's fighting all the way back, since 2010, and that's a guy who's seen a hard road and been around for a long time, and only lost one fight. That's crazy, absolutely incredible. So I'm looking forward to seeing him, and this will prove a lot for Sowma if he is what maybe Bellator think he is. I'm not so sure. I think Minakov will win this one, but we will see how that goes on Saturday as well. And in the main event, Fedor Emelianenko versus Tim Johnson. I think a lot of people said when this was announced, me included, that they were a little bit shocked that this fight was was actually announced and this fight was actually going to happen. Like looking at Fedor over the last while, his record: beat Rampage Jackson, lost to Ryan Bader, beat Chelson and Frank Mir, lost to Matt Mitrione, beat Fabio Maldonado and Jaideep Singh after his comeback. So, if you write off Jaideep Singh over that, Maldonado, a guy who fought a light heavyweight for most of his career, Mitrione of the same kind of era as Fedor, Chelson and middleweight, kind of that era as well, maybe a little bit later, but Chael was at the touching end of his career, I think, and Rampage of the Fedor era as well, almost fighting at super heavyweight at this stage, so the two losses to Bader and Mitrione. Fedor has been losing to those guys and not the guys of his vintage. I was wondering, and I think a lot of people are like, why didn't he fight a guy of his vintage? Like, even if it was a Josh Barnett, and I think Josh Barnett's probably maybe the toughest matchup of that vintage, you know, with other guys, maybe an Arlovsky, I know in the UFC, that's probably not going to happen. But there's definitely a name out there, and I think Barnett was the one. You know, a Rampage rematch is probably not going to happen, or Vanderlei is probably not going to happen at this stage of everyone's careers, but I just feel like Tim Johnson is not the name everyone wanted, and a big reason as well why a lot of people didn't want it is that Tim Johnson has a great chance of winning this fight, because Tim Johnson's a very good fighter, and you know, Fedor, talking about hard roads, you know, he's been around for 44 fights. Okay, he's only lost 6 of them, but he's had 45 years of age. He's almost had 20 years of fighting under his belt. It just feels like this is maybe not the one to end it all. And obviously this is a retirement fight for Fedor, you know. We know retirements in MMA, but the matchmaking itself for a retirement fight for Fedor's last fight, I don't like it. I wish it was someone else. I wish it wasn't Tim Johnson. But having said that, I don't think it's the worst fight in the world. I think, you know, if you look at Fedor over the last while, he hasn't looked that bad. But I'll say it again, he's only really doing well when he's fighting the legends. Even against in the Chael Sonnen fight, he got really tired in that fight. It's only that Chael kind of screwed himself up and gave Fedor, you know, top position a couple of times and handed Fedor the fight. I think, you know, against someone maybe a little bit more skilled, or you know, maybe a little bit bigger at the heavyweight weight class, he probably would have lost that fight. But he looked very tired when he wrestles or he's put into any situation like that. But when he goes in there and he throws those shots, he throws with reckless abandon, like the Fedor of 15 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever it was. He still has that. He can still go in and throw it. He's not afraid to let his hands go. He still has that power. And if he catches Tim Johnson in the first 10 minutes of this fight, or maybe not 10 minutes, but 5 minutes of this fight, he could put him out, and he probably will put him out. But Johnson in on the other end, he's a southpaw, but he does move around a lot in terms of fighting southpaw and orthodox. He also moves around a lot just generally. I think he's a very good athlete for the division, despite his size and maybe his awkward kind of look. They mentioned on commentary, one of the fights I was listening to, he's a 2-time All-American Division 2 champion. We don't see that much wrestling from him, but he is good in the clinch and he is good wrestling. He is the guy as well, right? We talked about Fedor coming out and throwing reckless abandon. Tim Johnson will counter everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. You know, he will counter every attack that is thrown at him. If Fedor throws 10 shots, Tim Johnson will be throwing at least 10 back. You know, he is one of those guys that there isn't too much thought put into it, you know, that's unfair. There isn't too much thought put into will I counter or won't I counter. The answer is yes. There's a lot of thought put into how he counters and, you know, what he's hitting guys with, absolutely. But he's not shy about it. You know, he's not shy about it. So that's why I think this fight, and that's the most important thing as well, this fight's going to be a fun fight, especially that first round. Because I can't see a fight where Fedor fights over in Moscow and he's retirement fight and he doesn't come out and go balls out and throws shots. I can't see that. So I think that will happen. And I do think Tim Johnson only knows how to fight one way. Now, he might try to take takedown in there, but he is going to throw counters and he's going to go hell for leather in there with Fedor and Emelianenko. And, you know, we've seen Fedor down the years. There's probably better people on Sherdog to talk about Fedor and Emelianenko's legacy than a young upstart who was probably about 12 when Fedor was in his pomp. But no, I've gone back and watched all those fights and you could see how good of a fighter Fedor was. And you can still see bits of it in his game over the last couple of years. Obviously, when you're 45 years of age, you're not going to have that pop. You're not going to have that speed that a legend like Fedor had in his pomp when he was an athletic heavyweight that maybe didn't look athletic. But we see a lot of those guys today fighting MMA that maybe don't look that athletic, but or even look at Tyson Fury in boxing as well. Don't look like the most athletic person in the world, but God, by God, when you put them in there with a pair of gloves on and put someone else against them, they're very, very hard to beat. And that's what Fedor was for years and years and years. And if this truly is his last one, what a legend. He will go down in this sport, win or lose on Saturday night. as one of the GOATs, one of the greatest of all time, one of the best to ever do it. In Bellator, they talk a lot and they probably say he's the greatest heavyweight of all time. We can debate that till the cows come home. But if you don't see Fedor as one of the best to ever do it, regardless of weight class, or one of the most important fighters to ever do it, regardless of the fact he never fought in the UFC, you're just wrong. Fedor, a legend, will always be a legend, and I'm looking forward to seeing him fight for one last time this Saturday night. That's it from me, Sean Sheehan here for Sherdog.com. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you all next time.